Okay, so protective properties of skin. So again, skin is a very important barrier, and not only against and it's not just a water resistant barrier, it's also important in protecting your body insides from the outside. And yeah, ooh, what do we have here? This is I don't think I saw this during the Olympics, but I heard like marathon runners, they often use Vaseline on their nipples because if all that friction rubbing, eventually if you rub it too much, then that's going to rub out the outer layers of the skin, and now he's ended up going to the inner layers where it's starting to bleed. And what we have here is a blister. So this is like what can happen if you have damage to the epidermis or the separation between the two layers. So why do we get blisters when we run or do a lot of walking or rub some surface of our skin repeatedly? Well, this is due to fluid accumulating between the epidermis and dermis. So this is what we have here with a blister. So it's not due to, I mean, it can be infected, but typically it's just your extracellular fluid building up between the layers of the epidermis and dermis. But again, why does that happen? If you rub the epidermis and dermis enough, eventually they can start to detach the junctions that hold it together. So if you start to detach the two layers, fluid can build up, and that's why we get blisters. And another pathology. So what we have here, decubitus ulcer, also known as a bed sore. So how do bed sores develop? Well, where do they commonly develop? So if you're at home, try to feel the back of your head. Feel your shoulder, feel your elbow, feel your tailbone. How about your heel? Now compare the skin there compared to the skin like on your arm, or on your cheek, or on your chest, or on your stomach. Notice that all these points here, they don't have they're not very thick in terms of their skin and hypodermis. So how do bed sores develop? Well, it's due to those areas we just covered right now. They're kind of bony, right? They don't have as much like meat or fluff, or the skin doesn't feel as thick there. But what happens is, like, if they have very low subcutaneous fat and not too much dermal tissue, what happens is that if you have there's this like very thin layer of this bone between the bone and the subcutaneous fat. Well, if you have this between a hard surface, it can actually pinch off the blood vessels in that area of skin. If you pinch off blood vessels, what do? You deprive that surrounding area of blood. You deprive that area of oxygen and nutrients, and your cells need oxygen and nutrients to survive. If you're pinching off blood vessels, what happens to cells? They start to die off. And this is why if you've ever been a CNA or interested in nursing, this is why they have to rotate patients, because you kind of want to help to relieve the pressure from all this bone pressing against a hard surface. So you want to restore blood flow, so you don't have the cells dying in these bony spots of your body. I know it's like a lot of gnarly looking things right here in this lecture. And I'm going to try to cover, if you have another class to go to, please go there right now. I want to cover burns as the last part, so I'm going to try and make a push to talk about burns. Okay, so what we have is a tissue injury. And what happens and the thing is that your skin is a barrier. It's not just a barrier against water, it's also a barrier against things like bacteria, viruses, or any other sort of things that can enter your body and start to take advantage of all the yummy blood and nutrients in your body and start to divide and infect your body. So what happens if bacteria enter a skin wound and they invade the immune system? Well, things that your skin does have some immune cells, but if you're very sensitive, look away. But this is what we have here. You might have heard that term flesh-eating disease, or what the more medical term is, necrotizing fasciitis. So what we have here is that in this case we have bacteria entering a wound, and the body wasn't able to, and medicines weren't able to clear that wound of bacteria. So the bacteria are dividing, they're released, and bacteria are unlike, if they enter and they're not cleared by the body, they're kind of like unwanted house guests. They create waste everywhere, they eat your food, and they start to cause the surrounding cells to die off. So they're like the worst neighbors ever. They're toxic, and they eat your food, and they make the whole environment very caustic. But fortunately, in the epidermis, you have these cells called Langerhans cells, and what they are, so notice that this is the stratum corneum over here, and here we have the stratum basale, and all of these cells over here. So these dark cells, these are Langerhans cells. They're not melanocytes. Melanocytes are a different type of cell. But Langerhans cells that we see here in this dark color, so they're kind of like your cell's immune, or part of your immune system, and they're kind of like in waiting. So say there is a cell or bacteria or something that wants to cause disease, well, these will help to gobble it up and tell the immune system, hey, we have this invader here, let's deal with this. There are other types of immune cells, but we covered that more in detail next semester.